Don't know me, my name is George Proakis. I am the Director of Planning here at the City of Somerville, a position that I've had for just almost 5 years at this point, and had the chance to really participate in a number of these Somerville by Design neighborhood plan efforts. What we have been doing in the past and what we are seeking to do when we do this type of work is to take our citywide Summer Vision comprehensive plan and implement it by digging down a little deeper and finding out what different neighborhoods want, what they want to happen in their neighborhood and how they want their neighborhood to work and kind of how things will grow and change and evolve over time. So we have completed plans for a neighborhood around Gilman Square. We've completed plans for a neighborhood around Lowell Street, kind of just in the area around Lagoon Square. We have almost completed plans for Davis Square in East Somerville, and we, with this key step, are moving forward on a plan for Winter Hill. What we like to do is spend 3 days, as we have, at a charrette sort of planning design session in the neighborhood. We were at 328 Broadway for the last 3 days with our design team. It's a mix of city staff and consultants. Pulled a whole bunch of ideas together, a real variety of ideas. And the general concept here is anything that we think might even be a good idea, we put on paper. And we don't hold anything back. We share everything that we came up with. So that is essentially what is on those boards on the back wall. We are now seeking to look out and say, what are your thoughts on it? We'll take that information. We will take any ideas that come from around City Hall staff, and we'll also sort of take these through sort of an engineering check and kind of make sure that the designs are possible to do and they're financially feasible and they make some sense. And we come back again, we hold another meeting, which will be right here on January 15th, where we will review these plans again, take out the ones people didn't like and sort of refine them to the things we want to put in our plan document. And then after that, it takes a few months to actually build a plan document, but we build a draft of a document that serves as the Winter Hill neighborhood plan, and we circulate that through the neighborhood for comments. Anybody who wants to comment on it, make sure we got it all right, make sure we can fix up anything we didn't get right, and then move forward with from there with getting a perspective on where we're going. So I want to take a quick moment first to thank Brad Rawson from my staff, who has been project manager on all of this and did a lot of the introductory presentation work beforehand, and the design and consulting team that's sitting around the first row here. I think they do deserve a round of applause for all of their work. We keep them very busy for this time frame, what is going to happen now is we're going to have the design team present and talk through kind of where we've gone and what ideas we've come up with. So background, Summer Vision, our comprehensive plan. If you don't have a copy, I think there's some copies of the shorter version, which are free and you can take with you. If you want the longer version, we have them back at City Hall, which has our 500 action steps and all the other pieces that go with it. If you haven't seen Summer Vision or don't know much about the details of it, the basics of it are based upon what we call the Summer Vision map, which is this idea of identifying areas to conserve, areas to enhance, and areas to transform. So areas to conserve are mainly the residential neighborhoods of the city. Areas to enhance are places like corridors like Broadway and Mystic Ave and key nodes like places of future Green Line stations. Areas to transform are places like Innerbelt and Assembly Square that a generation from now could look completely different than they had before. We're also trying to, as a part of that strategy, we're looking to reach our goal of creating 30,000 jobs, 125 acres of publicly accessible open space. The Summer Vision goal calls for 6,000 housing units, of which 1,200 are permanently affordable. Based upon the regional housing needs, the mayor has suggested the Summer Vision Committee look at whether that number should be even higher. A recent MAPC Regional Planning Agency report suggested that the region needs 400,000 housing units, and that to do our part, we would need 9,000, not just 6. So it's something we're looking at. 50% of trips being transit, biking, or walking to try to not have a real impact on traffic. And 85% of new development is in the transformative areas like Assembly Square and Inner Belt and Brick Bottom and Boynton Yards. The rest of it being enhanced in places like Broadway, all while at the same time making sure that we limit or end the strategy of squeezing infill development in amongst two-family houses in a way that is probably inconsistent with the neighborhood character. All of this strategy is something we're working towards submitting in a citywide zoning overhaul, the draft of which will be released this fall. But in addition to that, that draft is replaced on a lot of the current mapping strategies and the current sort of design strategies. As we do these neighborhood plans, we learn and we improve that draft, and we say the community wanted development here but didn't want development there, and we can make some of those changes as we go. So this is designed to be a very interactive process. We started with the vision meeting, which was September 29th here in this room. Had a pretty good crowd of folks who came out and proposed some suggested ideas for what was important to them. We then moved into 328 Broadway, which is our design studio, a vacant storefront in Winter Hill. Spent 3 days there, held a series of meetings, walked around, toured around the neighborhood with the design team so they could get to know what was what. Parked the art bus out front just because it's fun to do. And now we're working towards providing a plan with the items in it like this Gilman Square plan, public feedback, local stories. We get all these pieces together. At the end of the day, it also includes, as I said, that zoning strategy. Russ, you want to take it from here? So I'm going to hand it over to Russ Preston, who has been our lead designer on this team. He's going to walk you through with the folks in the rest of this process. We're going to have a little introductory piece done by our economic development team, and then move into the designs. All right?
Evening, everyone. Thanks for participating in the Winter Hill by Design process here, our design short the last couple of days. Big thank you to all the team members too. We've been running around all day trying to get these drawings and ideas out for you. So really appreciate all the last minute effort here to get these boards over and get this presentation together so we can share with you these ideas we've gathered the last couple of days. So just to kind of orient ourselves, this is Winter Hill at a 5-minute walk. We've kind of put that 5-minute walk at the center, which we heard over the last few days of this process is more or less at Temple and Broadway, the kind of 100% corner. So we'll talk a little bit about that 5-minute walk and what the implications of that are in the neighborhood. So there's two processes running at the same time. This is the neighborhood plan, but there's also the Central Broadway project area. And we've looked at those three concepts over the last few days with what the input we were taking in, and have a few ideas for that we're going to share now in the context of the neighborhood plan. So I don't want to confuse this, but there is two processes going on. So that will hopefully inform each other as we move forward. So looking at the one-way and two-way street system, it's just to orient ourselves around Broadway. And we know there's a lot of traffic issues around Broadway, a lot of congestion that we've heard over the course of the by design process so far. And you can see, if I can get our pointer here to work. There we go. Broadway's got a lot of away streets and a lot of coming into the streets, and that sets up an issue of a lot of turning movements that we can talk about further. What we heard a lot also was that there's a lack of open space in the neighborhood. So this is the existing open space in Winter Hill. Foss Park being kind of the most visible landmark. And we've also found some opportunities for new open space that we can talk about in more detail. Most notably sort of a new neighborhood square or green space there at the corner of Temple and Broadway. And then some other pocket parks and plazas that might have an opportunity to make it into the neighborhood. And you can see just quickly, that kind of fills in that gap. So we liked where those parks showed up. So from an economic development standpoint, I want to hand it over to Ed and Glenn to sort of set the stage here about how Winter Hill fits into the larger economy of the metro area.
Thank you, Russ. I'm Ed. This is Glenn. We're with Urban Advisors. And one of the things we wanted to mention when we started is that our mission here is really about finding ways to make a much better business environment and make things work better for the residents who are around this area who would like to see more retail and services and a more walkable street. And, okay, I'm technically challenged here. There. Okay. One of the major things that the city has in transforming itself, and a challenge at the same time, is this housing pressure. Anywhere, according to these projections, from 4,400 to 6,500 to 9,000 units, depending on which set of numbers you look at. You already are kind of dense, and you don't have much in the way of vacancy. So what this means, and there's nothing wrong with your incomes here. They're rising. And essentially what this means is that housing pressure means that you're going to have to be careful about where you put that stuff, because you have a neighborhood set of goals that says you're not going to start ruining the character of your neighborhoods to end up with putting in 9,000 units. This is about Broadway and disposable income. And if you look at the lower right-hand corner, that 106% is the comparison of the disposable income per acre around the Broadway corridor compared to the rest of the city. It's actually higher than average. So you have to ask yourself, well, Broadway shows the same trends, but it has lower retail and services and lower business diversity. And why is that? Well, there are some great dedicated hardworking merchants on Broadway, but at the same time, the area has had a lot of disinvestment, and the retail is scattered, and it's basically not a retail district, as some of the other areas in the city are. It's a traffic pass-through, and it operates that way. So what that means is that when we're talking about a strategy, there are things you can do to help the local businesses, but one of the major things when you have this housing crunch is that you're going to have to find a place to put those units, and that means when you look at redevelopment or development on this strip, you have to maximize the efficiency of land use. And that means you also have to create an urban framework that enables that, and that is what will enable you to lower the risk and the perception of risk for retailers who would like to move there. Because the risk is not in the income, it's in the perception of disinvestment. That residential demand gives the city a lever to get what you want. It's not even a matter of negotiating. The developers want to do the residential. They're crying out to do it here. So you can bargain for the kinds of things that will make your neighborhood better, like the retail space and the affordable housing. And allowing the developers to have this higher residential intensity means that you're also adding people right on the street there who will be walking around every day on that piece of street. They'll be there at night walking. You'll start filling in those gaps. The appearance of disinvestment will change, and then the perceptions will change, and you will find that retailers will believe that there is a lower risk of them going there. And that leads us to some of the particular issues about the area, like the grocery market. Where it is.
So we were also asked to take a look at grocery in this area, that it's been, since Star Market left, residents were interested in having something come in and replace it. And they had been told apparently a number of times that maybe this wasn't the great area for grocery. And after doing a little bit of research, we have some unfortunate news to report. As you take a look at the area, these are circles around the other grocery facilities, and the circle is roughly their primary trade area. So you can kind of see how if you're going to add a new grocery in the area, there's really just one good place left to capture your own market. And the good news is there is a place left to do that. The bad news is it's not at the facility that maybe you'd like it to be, but Magoon Square looks like a really great place, and it turns out there are a couple of sites there available that probably could support a grocery. The other good thing about that is that that can be entirely market-driven and shouldn't need any kind of subsidy. We're then also asked to look specifically at the Star Market site and think about what it would take to get that redeveloped, and what intensity of use needs to be there to support to make it feasible. And we found we looked at a lot of scenarios that I think Russ has drawn up, and we can talk about the specifics of the design. But generally, as a market-based project, a developer is probably going to need to do surface parking. Assuming they need to do 1 floor of retail, they'll then probably need 3 floors of residential uses above that to support the land costs and the parking. Now, if the city were to be involved in that project and subsidize the cost of parking or subsidize the land cost, then a developer would probably be able to get away with maybe doing one floor of residential and 1 floor of retail and 2 floors of residential. And I'll hand it back to Russ.
So we're going to go through a bunch of these different study areas in a lot of detail, and then we're going to get up afterwards and look at the boards, and you can ask lots of questions really looking at the drawings. So I'm going to go very quickly. So write your questions down for later. But the first study area is Mystic Ave, which really a lot of the issues are about what do we do with the overpass of 93? How do we connect to the river and the amenities along the river to the neighborhood? And then how do we mitigate some of the issues of this large regional roadway? So this is a quick study we did, very detailed here, about how to connect across Mystic under the highway, and just some simple pedestrian maneuvers here, these area of refuge, some better crosswalks, some better bicycle lanes coming across to connect to the regional network along the river. And that can be done very quickly along Mystic. And this is a view of that underpass today, and this is a view with some of those improvements installed. So that's getting us across to the boathouse and across to the river. So the next issue on Mystic is, what do we do with all of this empty space? You know, it's kind of a no man's land. It's not interesting to walk past. And an early idea was, well, can we somehow buffer the highway? You know, a large wall. You know, how do we actually make the highway not be there? And then how does that affect the neighborhood? So a crazy idea was we actually line the wall with solar panels, and it's Somerville's largest solar array. This faces south. It could power a lot of industrial or fabrication uses that go under the highway. So that was a wild idea that we want your feedback on. But getting more into the sort of nuts and bolts of it is sort of coming out from the 93 off ramp, sort of getting onto Mystic. There's a way we could neck this down and make this much more pleasing and slowing cars down, so that this back and forth of pedestrians is improved. And then also, what happens underneath the highway? And this is showing a sort of Butler building, sort of warehouse type building under the trestles of the overpass, with loading and parking behind, screened from the neighborhood on the north. And that will look something like this. So you could get a whole lot of fabrication space, sort of overflow space from Artisan Asylum, and this could really become sort of a maker avenue here along Mystic under the highway. And this starts to sort of make this more of a place and less of an auto-dominated area. So our next study area is Temple Street, sort of moving up the hill. You know, we've talked about this intersection, the connection across, but we wanted to look at Temple Street as a corridor, sort of potentially a bikeway or a greenway coming up from 10 Hills and the river up into the neighborhood. So this is it today. You know, it has some large travel lanes. Travel speeds were noticed were higher than normal. So there was some potential, and here it is, you know, as it comes into sort of Broadway and the 100% corner. But some quick sketches we did was you could actually fit 2 bike lanes and, you know, two full parking lanes, 2 bike lanes, and 2 travel lanes along that. So we could bring in bicycle facilities very easily with the existing curb to curb. This is another version of that with the turning lane in the center. And then a third version which puts a cycle track on one side, a 2-way cycle track on one side, protected. And that would come down and come down the whole street here. Now, another thing we noticed was there's a lot of opportunity here to celebrate this church, you know, with a new public space. And you on the open space map, this was a location for that, is to really enhance this area and slow the cars down along this turn. So you can see here, the bicycle facilities come in. We've enlarged this plaza in front of the church, made it more inviting for pedestrians to come in and enjoy, and really a gateway into this part of the neighborhood. So sort of moving back around the neighborhood to Foss Park, sort of the other connection to Mystic up to Broadway. You know, you've seen the images. You know, this park has evolved over time. There's been a lot of discussion about what needs to happen there. Our recommendation is that this needs to be further studied. What's the programming? What are the activities and uses that go there? But really early on, we've got a lot of consensus about, you know, issues of where the fields are located, and then issues about, you know, how does Broadway meet the park, and how does this edge interact with McGrath Highway? So we've looked at those as sort of to kind of kickstart the thinking around what happens to Foss Park. So a big move here that I want to point out right away is sort of this connection across to the supermarket area, and really strengthening that intersection for pedestrians. Other things to notice that, you know, we've moved some of the sports facilities down and put an amphitheater, you know, something that can actually berm up along the highway. And then some other facilities here, programming farmers markets, community gardens, and the like. Then another alternative is really berming up along the highway to shield the noise, air quality, increase the overall friendliness of the park, and sort of pull that down along the edge of McGrath. And this sort of opens up the opportunity for a much larger amphitheater, performance-type place, soccer field, and then possibly putting the pond back into the park. And then that pushes the ball fields and other sports facilities, tennis courts and basketball courts, down closer to the pool. So moving along, so this brings us to the edge of Broadway, and this intersection is really a mess right now. You know, there's a lot of leftover pavement, a lot of leftover pedestrian space that's not being programmed. This is sort of all empty space that's just there. It's, and then this parking facility, you know, we thought, okay, well, is there a better way we can organize all of this this land? So we looked at, well, we could build on it. We could actually program it with new buildings. This could be a new YMCA, new mixed-use building, and really sort of create a gateway into Winter Hill that meets Foss Park. You know, improve the connection from the park over to the neighborhood. And this is a redevelopment here, mixed use as well. So further details here, you know, there's sort of an interesting corridor connection here to McGrath, and then this whole line of boulevard. What do we do with that? And we looked at a couple different versions. An idea that came up when we were planning East Somerville was actually trenching out McGrath, pushing it down, and then pulling across Broadway with a deck on top of McGrath. This would actually create sort of a gateway plaza that's for local traffic for Broadway and getting onto McGrath, and then really tie the two neighborhoods and the access to Foss Park and the access to over to East Somerville's Main Street and the grocery store area much easier. So we want to reintroduce that idea here because we think it would really benefit East Somerville. So then on the radical side of the plan, we thought, well, building on these redevelopment areas that might happen on the corner of the park, could we use some of this land in the wide section of Broadway to actually create more either development pads or more public building facilities such as market buildings or such? So that's sort of, you know, pulling this up and creating really a two-sided street. You know, these are two-sided blocks, one way in this direction and one way in that direction. And that would, you know, allow cars to travel slower and really extend that Main Street in Broadway in Winter Hill. This is another version of that in more detail, and we can talk more about the architecture ideas here if you'd like. This is a very quick sketch representing that sort of flat iron building in the center of Broadway, and then sort of Broadway going up the hill and down the hill on each side. So on the other end of the spectrum of options for here is can we actually extend Foss Park up into the neighborhood with green space and really rationalize Broadway as an avenue, as a grand gesture here from the interchange of McGrath. This is another option for possibly a roundabout for how to handle that intersection. And then bringing up the park, and this is relatively wide, where you could stroll and bike through here all the way up to what might be a new Winter Hill Square. So this is another iteration of that YMCA building with several other development sites, and this is sort of a pared down version of the building in the center of the street. And then another iteration of a field house building with possibly an indoor pool for the YMCA, and then a sort of remnant of that large green space. And this is just necking down. This would still be 4 lanes, turning lanes, bike lanes, and parking. So there's still quite a bit of right-of-way in this version. And this is an alternative where we've actually shifted that building in the street to all of the sort of leftover islands and parking area in front of those existing homes and businesses. So this could be a really nice mixed-use sort of outdoor seating, sort of promenade leading into the park. So getting more into the details of Broadway, there's really, we really looked at the history of this street and tried to understand, how it's evolved over time and how that can inform what we might do in the future. And this is a great old photo of the trolley tracks running right down the center of a nice large avenue median, and then you can see all the shop fronts. So we thought, well, what does that feel like today in that same spot? So there we are, and there we are today. Oh, excuse me. So do that one more time for everyone. We're getting bogged down here. So we explored a lot of the thinking. These are very big files, so sorry they're kind of blurry. We can look them in the back of the room. But this is concept 1, 2, and 3 of the streetscape design. So concept 2 has been the preferred design coming out of the process to date for the streetscape. And there's really 3 sections to this design. It's sort of west of the main Broadway intersection, Broadway to sort of Temple Street, and then down towards Temple to McGrath. And those are the 3 sort of chunks that we've explored. But a few things I want to point out. Looking at the report that came along with those studies, there's a couple of quotes. All of them have the same amount for automobile. And we just wanted to bring that back up and question that assumption. Should we have less space for automobile and more space for people? Or on the other side of that coin, should we have more space for automobiles and less space for people? And we thought that that needs to be discussed in the context of the larger vision for the neighborhood. And this is concept 2, which you can see there's sort of the intersection of Temple and the intersection of Main there. But really what we started to look at the details of what happens along Broadway. In this plan, a few things poked out. Some of the medians are being taken out, so we're losing trees. Some of the sidewalks we started to question. So then we dug more into the report, and we discovered that this concept might be the preferred, but it actually has the narrowest sidewalks for pedestrians. So we thought we needed to revisit that and say, is that really the vision for Winter Hill? Or is that in conflict with it? So this gets us to sort of a more holistic understanding of how the neighborhood functions from a transportation or mobility standpoint. And do we want to prioritize pedestrians, or do we want to have the car be the priority? So we should discuss that further with everyone this evening. And looking at that at a network approach. So this is Winter Hill's sort of people-oriented network right now. And you can see in the back of the room later that we have some major thoroughfares for bicycles facilities, and then the sort of minor networks, the more local neighborhood streets that could use minor facility improvements. And these are the more sort of commuter corridors for bicycles. And then we've sort of identified the nodes of destinations that bicyclists and walkers might use in this network, tying it back down to the river and to the Assembly Square T line as well. So we need to think about Broadway's transportation improvements in the whole context of how people get around the neighborhood. And also very important is this Marshall Street connection from a pedestrian standpoint down to the future Gilman Square. That's actually a much quicker walk, and we envision that being a fairly high use. The character of that street is going to change when the T goes in. So just some quick, Andrew, who will talk in a little bit about some short-term interventions, went out and shot some speeds. And surprisingly, the road doesn't perform that bad right now. You can see the highest speed we clocked was only 41 miles per hour. But really, we want to get that number down to around 25 along the whole corridor to make it safe for pedestrians. You can just see here from the studies done on pedestrian fatalities, below 30, below 25, we really have to shoot for. And then noise, the sort of ambient noise of the street is really important to making great places work. So, we measured that, and again, you can see it's tolerable, but then, as a bus goes by, some trucks go by, it gets up in the uncomfortable area. So we have to figure out ways to, with street trees and other types of street furniture to bring that down and lower the speeds of the cars. So, sort of the two areas coming down the hill from the sort of Main Street intersection, and then, what does that happen in the future? So the existing condition today, is this section here. A new idea for that is that possibly we have a median down the center that involves a cycle track. And that, kind of keeps the historic character of the sort of avenue of Broadway intact. Or we put the facilities on both sides for the bikes. This is still keeping a relatively large sidewalk for cafe seating or outdoor activities, and then go down to a two-lane profile with 2 parking lanes. And then on the other section of the street, the sort of Broadway from Temple down to Foss Park, is really a commercial Main Street section. This is the most intact sort of commercial potential for two-sided Main Street in the district. So the existing conditions, it looks a lot like this. The current streetscape option 2 narrows the sidewalks in areas to put in the bicycle facility, and then adds a turning lane to a number of the blocks. So we're going to lose a lot of trees in the center for that. So we thought, okay, well, what other options are there? Well, we could continue that center median with the cycle track as an option, or we could put going uphill a facility. I'm not sure if this is going downhill, having a facility on the street, and going uphill where bikes are moving slower and might need to rest or get off, having a cycle track, grade separated cycle track as an option. And then as we go down more towards Foss Park, we have all of this extra land where Broadway sort of fans out. And this is looking at keeping the bicycles on each side of it and providing a large, potentially green space or common that is in the center of Broadway. And then just some quick thoughts. There's some concepts in this in the streetscape design right now, but really this is the intersection of Main and Broadway. And really thinking about this as, thinking about this as a plaza for this end of this commercial node along Broadway. And maybe this is a raised speed table with interesting pavers that come across, so it really feels like a place where pedestrians can cross comfortably and cars slow down to exist within the context of that little place. And then just a note, this sort of thinks about relocating that park. It is Somerville's smallest park right now, but not many people are using it. It's not really, it's a visual amenity to the neighborhood, but not much else. So is there a way we could reincorporate that into this design? So moving further down Broadway, something to note. So this is kind of the 4.5 block node around Temple Street, and we wanted to really understand what was going on there, where the buildings meet the street, and sort of how are we making that outdoor room function today. So this is sort of the study area of looking at the frontage. How do the buildings interface with the horizontal areas of the street? And we realized right away that there's a lot of curb cuts. So this is the number, the amount of frontage that is devoted to cars getting on and off the sidewalk. So that creates kind of a hostile environment for pedestrians and cyclists right off the bat. Actually 61% or 16% of the sidewalk. So at 16% of your stroll is looking out for cars along those sidewalks. 37% of the frontage is actually devoted to just cars. So that's an important thing. For retail streets, they become very boring very quickly for folks, especially if you're walking past parking lots. So this isn't healthy for the existing businesses in the neighborhood. So then we rated all of the facades, all the storefronts from a sort of a 1 is the best to a 5 is the worst, and looked at how, what's the gradient of quality of storefronts along this little stretch. And you can see that 41% of the frontage is the lowest 2 levels of rating. So there's a lot of improvement needed with the existing storefronts as is. So this leads us to a sort of a redevelopment area around Broadway. And you can see here there's some opportunity sites. We've already talked about the sort of maker space, the sort of fabrication space that could happen over near Mystic and the highway. But we also want to talk about the opportunity here at the corner of McGrath, the opportunity here with the existing gas station next to the fire station, and then really the core of redevelopment potential is along the intersection of Temple, Marshall, and Broadway. This being the Star Market site, this being the Walgreens site. So let's talk about Walgreens first. Walgreens it's a suburban style retail building in a walkable neighborhood. So it's the wrong type of animal for this ecosystem. This just screams drive fast. I want to see you. I want to pull into Walgreens when I'm going 55 miles per hour. This just gives all the visual cues that you're in the suburbs and you should be in your car. So as a redevelopment site, we looked at this building and a number of these other very handsome apartment style buildings along Broadway as the sort of cue for what might happen here. So here's a quick sort of beginning of our explorations into this, is actually knitting in a small street or pedestrian way to connect to the residential street. And that's something about this neighborhood. Winter Hill has a lot of long blocks. So where we looked at how can we actually make a finer grained network for folks to choose to walk through the neighborhood. And this has apartment buildings, mixed use apartment buildings on the front, and then a series of townhouses coming back to meet the residential street with parking below and sort of decked above. These are some other options for how those townhouses might meet the residential street behind. This is existing today, sort of the lovely freeway signage. And then this might be an idea of what it could develop into as a mixed-use apartment-style building. And this is 2 buildings, really. Sort of the second one is pushed back to meet sort of there's a little sort of paper street here that could create a nice little plaza or a little pocket park here. Give some more some public space to the neighborhood. And then this is a different version that has some more height to it. Looking at what is there really much difference between the number of floors on this redevelopment? The hill, the context to the existing tall historic buildings, and we don't think there are. So stepping back down to sort of Broadway, sort of the 300 block of Broadway. This is the post office here. We wanted to say, well, this is a lot of the car-oriented frontage exists in this block between School and Marshall. What can we do about that? And how can this incrementally develop or be a piece of a larger redevelopment strategy? So one idea is that it's an incremental approach. This is actually the space where the charrette was held. This is the existing apartment building. And we looked at bringing Bradford as a dead end now, and actually bringing that through to connect to Marshall. Sort of providing some real frontage, some infill potential here for residential, and servicing all of these buildings along Broadway from the rear, and really reestablishing this as a place for people. And you can see this is sort of a quick redevelopment of our charrette building, what it would look like with retail on the first floor, and then how the rest of the block would build out. with a mixed-use building here, a more intense commercial building on the corner, and then a mixed-use building with some potential smaller three-family or townhouse-style infill behind to sort of, mesh well with the existing neighborhood. So then across the street, sort of kitty corner, we have the Star Market site. What do we do with the Star Market site? So existing conditions today, you can see this is the other bulk of our sort of auto-oriented frontage along Broadway. But we think really quickly, using paint and potted plants and food trucks and umbrellas, this could become Winter Hills Plaza, Winter Hills Square. This could just be a weekly occurrence of food truck rally, with some potted plants, something that's seasonal or comes in as a programmed element of the parking lot. And this is happening in cities all over the country and world, where these sort of temporary or temporal public spaces are being created. And this is really looking at how can we actually, keep these surface parking lots as efficient as possible and not displaces the parking that's there with this public space. So these two uses can coexist together. And then sort of at that point, this introduces the idea of tactical urbanism, the sort of lighter, quicker, cheaper approach to how we can improve our neighborhoods in days, not years. And I'd like Andrew to come up from Team Better Block to kind of take us through some other ideas in this topic.
Thanks, Russ. All right, so you're walking around your neighborhood and you're like, oh, I wish I could just move that curb a little bit, or I could paint a bike lane here. That's my job. I get to go do that in places. So what I did is I walked around Winter Hill, rode my bike around a bit, and just took some of the ideas that we'd done in other cities about these kind of temporary places that kind of can get the market going a bit, and maybe test out some of these ideas from the designs that you've seen today in a temporary fashion. So not permanent, not that it's going to go down forever, but you can get out there and try some things and see if that works in Somerville and see how you want to use it in your neighborhood. So just a couple ideas. One of the ones, I love Medford Street. I rode my bike over there, and it reminded me of a street back home where we have festivals and we string lights. It's so simple, but it makes like this intimate area. And we close the street for street festivals there, and program them with things for kids to do, things for adults to do, and we even celebrate like local stories. So I'm from Dallas, and the only thing cool we had was like Bonnie and Clyde or Lee Harvey Oswald. And we actually had festivals with this and food, and it becomes part of the neighborhood identity, so you can use the existing infrastructure maybe just in a different way, and it doesn't take much. Some of the ideas about Foss, I saw already some comments that what about trying out farmers markets there, or temporary markets in the area. And just with paint, you can really transform some of that ugly concrete into a place, and then use temporary food kiosk and retail kiosk, or even tents, really, seasonally. And these really temporary playgrounds are cool. I heard you did one in Union Square this last weekend. This lady made these pieces that were almost like giant Legos you could put together. So ideas you can test out on Foss. I called this Revere Square. I don't know if that's the name of it. I just saw the plaque talking about Paul Revere, but that's a good thing in your community, giving places names, even though it's Broadway or it's Broadway at Main. Maybe it's not Revere Square, but finding a name for these little places really allows you to identify with them. And some of the ideas from the streetscape master plan was to create a new plaza there, and you can do that with paint, bollards, signs, plants. Try it out seasonally, see if it works, see if the businesses around there really appreciate it, and then have space for people to create in, to show off their talents here. I went to Honk Fest. My gosh, you got some talented folks in Somerville. One of my things when I was walking around my walking audit I saw was, when you go to Europe and you just see those streets where just stuff just kind of spills out from the retail or from the neighborhood or from the residential into the street. Well, a lot of times in America, we've kind of regulated that out. We've said that that's too messy. We want it clean. You definitely have clean sidewalks in Somerville. Get them a little more messy, It really creates some friction. I think it will allow for those retail businesses to do a lot better as well. And so there's some really quick code changes that can happen here. A lot of these I think you have to go through your alderman now to get, and I'm recommending that you should allow staff to do that, and then on a complaint basis, go address if someone is really abusing the right-of-way. But that's the fun stuff. I rode up and down Jake Street and Heath, and as a bicyclist, I really didn't want to go back up the hill to go back over. So I think there's enough room there. You could do these bike boulevards and just allow bicycles to go contraflow. And what that'll do is also slow those streets down a little bit. And then especially access to this school, getting kids to bike, that's a great way to do it. Mom can actually see kid go the right way on the street toward the school. And then there's this idea of intersection repair. This is where the community literally gets out there and paints intersections, and it becomes like this little eye candy down the street, and also identity for the streets. I understand a lot of Brazilian immigrants in this area, so maybe something to celebrate that. Marshall, you're about to have a green line stop down here, and this is going to be the entrance into Broadway, is up Marshall. And the same way, can you make it easy for bicyclists there? Can you give some identity right on the street with just paint to identify that neighborhood? Summer streets. Talking about maybe trying summer streets on Broadway. We've done these before where we use part like of the median. So this is before and after, and we programmed the median of a big street like Broadway, or we moved all the traffic onto one side and programmed to one side of it. So you've got plenty of room on Broadway. This is a great way on the weekend to highlight the retail that you do have there. Most people shop at 6 p.m. on Saturdays or after 6. Does that make it easier? After 6 on weekends.
After 6 and on weekends.
Oh, after 6 and on weekends. Okay. Temple Square. We already saw the idea of how to create a little square over here. I think you could do it even with just some of the space that you have now, using these paint bollards, signage for little pedestrian bulb outs, make it easier to cross the street, art crosswalks that you can use that really give the place an identity, a place that you can call your local square, and then using these seasonal parklets and bike parking in a location to expand the sidewalk, basically.
So that's what can happen like this weekend, if people are so moved. But so leading to sort of some of the longer change ideas, this is the existing Stop and Shop site. Just to orient everyone, this is Temple here in Marshall. So we did some really quick studies about how this might redevelop, and this is the fairly sort of conventional mixed use, knit the new street in, line Broadway, parking behind in the center of the block. Nothing, that's great. That would really enhance Broadway. It would put the parking behind. These are all good things. But we heard we want a square, but we also want to, there was early on in the discussion, what about a market? So here's a small 35,000 square foot market building sort of embedded in that redevelopment plan. But as Glenn and Ed shared with us, we're going to have to modify that vision. This was a quick view of what that might feel like at the corner of Marshall and Broadway on the Star Market site. So then a finer grain, how do we actually knit in some more dense housing, some more fine grain block structure, and have some courtyards to sort of bring some public space sort of right off Broadway and sort of more embedded in the block. And then this led to the attached green, sort of attaching the green to essentially sitting in the parking lot of Star Market with new mixed-use buildings around. This might be a view of a redevelopment of one of those streets in that plan. And this led to the idea of how can we actually provide a block that Star Market could sit on or be redeveloped on, knit this new street through, and provide a few options for travelers taking a right or left on Temple to get to Broadway or get away down to Temple. And then a new mixed-use building or the Rite Aid building could sit on this block. And this is the existing two two buildings on the corner there that's remain, and then a new mixed-use building fronting on the square. We've been calling it Temple Square, but I think that name is still up for debate. And this is really important because where this is situated is actually really nice because it allows the sort of cars to still do this turning movement and protects the square. It also, along Marshall Street, if you look at the plan for Gilman Square, we've created a new square down near the station that has a tower envisioned for it. And Marshall, the visual termination of Marshall was something that bookends that would be a very nice feature. So when people come out of the T stop, they can look down Marshall and say, oh, there's something down there, and bring people up the hill, sort of marking this as a special place. This is a quick view up Marshall, kind of developing this idea. Then the idea, well, how does this work from a traffic standpoint? We thought it might just function like a rotary, where these might actually just be stoplights or stop signs, excuse me. We actually saw the other day from the studio during the little power outage that the lights went black, and we noticed that people were still moving, things moved along. And then as soon as the lights came back on, there was a giant queue of cars. So this idea that Broadway has a lot of traffic, but if it moves slower, it might function better. And then the sort of idea that this is a two-way system, kind of a lot like a courthouse square out in the Midwest. This is a view of that new square, looking back towards Marshall, and this is the sort of the gesture towards the square, the view up Marshall from Gilman Square. And then some of the feedback we heard from that early on was, well, we might really consider Broadway, it needs to have that commuter traffic go flowing through it, and the idea of going around the square might be too much for the neighborhood to handle. So this looks at really keeping 4 lanes coming through Broadway, and the square really exists on the side of Broadway. So this would still, this isn't great for pedestrians. There's still quite a bit of back and forth. But this also provides the square, as the previous plans does, and this looks at some more intense redevelopment of these two sites based on some of the work that Glenn did. So how do we park all this? Parking is always a big problem. We hear that a lot. As a redevelopment plan, there's 2 options. We could actually have a district parking facility that gets cut into the hill. So this is under Stop and Shop, coming in off Sewell at grade and going into the ground, and then going out on Grant using existing grades. So there's no ramping needed, or very little ramping needed. And that gets 220 to 250 cars. But that would provide the parking and some public sort of retail parking underneath this redevelopment. And also, ideally, it has some capacity for future development, possibly along the south side of Broadway, that might not be able to fit its own parking demand on the site. And Winter Hill, we're looking at how to calibrate the parking demand for the buildings so that it meets the market as well as provides for a sort of multimodal neighborhood. So this is a view up Marshall now, and then the new building. And you can see the square here to the right. And then another option was, what happens if people want a larger square? This is expanding that square, removing the buildings at the corner, so you actually get a full view of the square at Temple. And then, as an alternative, what if that doesn't happen? What if Star Market, something else happens with Star Market? Here's an option where there could be a new square at the corner of Marshall and Broadway in conjunction with the redevelopment of sort of the 300 block. So that might be another alternative for Winter Hill Square. And this is kind of all of those ideas kind of pieced together that we can talk about on the boards. And then just sort of in summary, this is today. This is the larger square version with the redevelopment, and this is the attached square with the termination on Marshall Street. So thank you, everyone. At this point, I really invite you all to come in the back and check out the boards as soon as George makes this friendly announcement.
Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate the point that all of the work that you have just seen is the product of less than 3 days of work, of a team that has spent days and evenings of writing and drawing and creating ideas. and we like to put these sort of ideas in a plan document. But we don't know what to put in the plan document and what not to put in the plan document until you tell us what you like about these ideas and what you don't like about these ideas. If you think that the roundabout at McGrath is ridiculous, but the roadway that had the YMCA building is a great idea, but the one that had this green space, you know, whatever. We need to know that. Now, the best way to do that, Brad has a series of handout sheets, which he's going to hand out to all of you. You will see that on those sheets it lists, like, I believe it's 55 different numbers. And then below it is a point to score on a score of, I think it's like 1 to 5, whether or not you like those typical things. And then put comments you want to write about it below. So I urge you to hang around, grab a sheet, go out to the back, look at the drawings in the back, which basically are all of the things that Russ and the team just presented, go to a particular number and score it. Now, ideally, if you have the time, you can work your way through the boards from 1 to 54, or if the first board's crowded, you can start at the second or third and work through and do every one. But if you just have strong opinions about a couple of things, it's perfectly reasonable to fill out a sheet that just talks about numbers 22, 23, 24, and 49, if those are the only things that you care about, and then hand the sheet in and go home, and that's perfectly fine. That is as helpful to us as anything. So that really helps. The one thing I'd want to say is not on the boards is some of the stuff the economic development team talked about at first, about the more general strategy, about why we proposed redevelopment here to begin with, of why we felt as if there was a lot of conversation about wanting to move retail forward in this district and have more amenities for the neighborhood, and our general understanding that in order to do some of that, one needed to make certain things happen. If you have thoughts on those ideas, if you have thoughts on anything else anyone said, if you have thoughts on something somebody said that didn't end up on a board for some reason, just write it on the back of the page. It's all fine. I think I can't remember if we did these where you can fill out your name on them if you want. You don't have to if you don't want. We encourage you to. It's good to know. Okay, and yeah, we have a little graphic design error. You all can cross out the words Davis Square on the first page and write in Winter Hill. Sorry about that. As I said, this is the fifth of these that we've done. So we've got a system down pretty well. The problem is we do a lot of cut and pasting. As I said, this is all the product of about 3 days of work. So sometimes, you know. Anyway, grab the sheet, take a look around. We'll all hang out back there and answer questions about things. And thank you all for coming out. And I hope you enjoy the work we're doing. Yes. Yes. If you have a friend or neighbor or other person who might be interested in this, what we do, and please be patient with us, it takes a couple of days, is we scan everything on these boards. We put them on somervillebydesign.com, which is an interactive website. You can comment on the site. You can email us. You can get one of these papers from us. We also will probably look to find, we will look to find a place in City Hall. If nowhere else, we'll put them in the hallway in our third floor offices for probably the next week or two. And if people are interested, they can stop by and take a look at them and provide us your comments and thoughts on them as we go. And we will have a follow-up open house meeting on, I believe it is a Wednesday, January 15th, right back here at Healy School to talk about what feedback we got and where we're going from here. So mark that on your calendar now. It's a couple months away. It gives us some time to process all your thoughts, process the ideas we get on the web, process the comments we get from folks coming in at City Hall, check to make sure we haven't designed anything that is completely infeasible, and then determine kind of what ideas to come out with from there. I think it goes without saying, we don't own any of the private land in these development ideas. We have found that a lot of the landowners become very interested in these ideas as we present them. We have, for example, a plan design in our Lowell Street plan that we have a developer who's proposed exactly what's in that plan, complete with the little house next to the residential neighborhood to kind of step down and make it work better with the housing around it. So the feedback matters, the results matter. It helps us as we interact with people who may want to develop these sites. We need to hear that. So thanks a lot for coming out, and appreciate your feedback. Thanks.